Good morning, or depending on when you're listening to this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross and I was always told I had a voice for radio, so I've made a podcast all about the Pokémon trading card game. And you're listening to PTCG Radio. Now this week we've got, I think, quite an exciting week this week, to be perfectly honest with you, ladies and gentlemen. We've got the latest batch of regionals. There were 3 regional championships this past weekend, one of which was streamed over the interwebs by Pokémon themselves, and I thank them very much for doing so. It was awesome. I've watched a whole bunch of rounds, and I'm still not done. It was something ridiculous, like 17 rounds worth of Pokémon being streamed, which is just plain awesome. So yeah, thank you very much. That's fantastic. And I don't know if I've ever made it completely. No, I'm going to be honest with you. I've made it very clear exactly that there is one not one Pokemon. That's silly. One commentator that I'm not a big fan of, and he wasn't on it this weekend. They brought in Kenny Wisdom, who seems like a lovely chap and did a pretty good job, quite frankly. So yeah, it was all right. Not great. No, that's a lie. She was pretty great. I enjoyed it very much. There was a few odd little things here and there, a few misplays, but as someone who commentates on games as often as I do, I know how difficult it is to get everything right, and Lord knows there's no shortage of people waiting to tell me every time I get something wrong. Although, actually, I had a whole bunch of people get in touch after last week. Now, you guys on the podcast, I'm cool with you. You guys I like. Because sometimes you get in touch to tell me I've made a mistake, and sometimes you get in touch to tell me new information just to make sure I know it. Sometimes you get in touch to just say hello. Sometimes you get in touch to tell me that you're enjoying the podcast, etc. Unlike that lot on YouTube. Now, to be fair, it's not that bad. There are some lovely, lovely people out there on YouTube. But it does seem that people on YouTube are more often than not saying negative things on my videos. And if you're one of the people on YouTube that says nice things, then thank you very much. I love you. But one correction that needs to be made since last week. The Tyrantrum deck that made 9th and the regionals last weekend, and actually this weekend did even better than that. Of course it wasn't the Furious Fist Tyrantrum. It was the Tyrantrum EX, the promo, and of course it was. The annoying thing was, I record this podcast on a Wednesday. On the Tuesday, I was at League looking at that box and very almost bought one, based on how good Tyrantrum EX looked. How I made that mistake, I'm not entirely sure. But remember, ladies and gentlemen, I have been fairly poorly the last couple of weeks. That is my excuse, and I'm sticking to it. By the way, cheers to all the people that have got in touch to wish me a good recovery. That was very nice of you all. Tyrantrum EX is a wonderful Pokemon that does 190 for 4 energy, which is really, really good. It can even one-hit KO some EXs. Some Mega EXs, although, not many. But for instance, Manectric, you can get him. And since it largely revolves around Steel energy, you just have to play Steel. I believe the attack is 1 Fighting, 2 Metal, and 1 Colourless. So you can just use Double Dragon and Steel energy to get it rolling. And of course, you can use things like Edge-a-Slash to block attacks from Pokemon with special energy attached, which of course is something that you may well want to be doing. A really good, innovative deck, one which I'd quite like to have a try out the next time we have an expanded tournament. Now, I don't know when our next expanded tournament in the UK is. Hopefully there'll be a league challenge or something soon. So, before we get to all that good stuff, let's have a look at some news. Also, you guys should feel very lucky. Firstly, happy Back to the Future Day. It is October 21st, 2015, which, of course, is the day to which they travel in Back to the Future 2. I hope I'm getting all my information correct. I was so excited about Back to the Future Day that I actually went and bought the Blu-ray set of Back to the Future. I've just finished Back to the Future, and rather than stick Back to the Future 2 straight on and watch them all in a row with no break, I'm taking a break so you lovely people can have your podcast. I know, you're welcome. So our February set, remember our November set is going to be Breakthrough. Our February set is going to be Breakpoint, which is going to be the equivalent to Japan's next set, Rage of the Broken Sky. It's going to have 120 cards, 5 Pokemon Break, and 11 Pokemon X, including 2 Mega Evolutions. So I've been telling you about some Pokemon EX which we haven't got yet, wondering when we're going to get them. It's going to be a lot more Pokemon EX in the next set. So, quite frankly, sounds like fun. And we know we're getting Greninja Break, we know we're getting Luxray Break, and we know we're getting Mega Sizor EX. So that all sounds like a little bit of fun. Sounds good. We're also getting a Break Evolution box, which is going to be released. It's coming with 3 Pokemon Break promos, a Jumbo Break card, 5 booster packs, and a PTCGO card. Coming for $40, which is quite frankly awesome. So yeah, sounds like fun. Now, I told you before about the Battle Arena decks Mewtwo versus Darkrai. These are these decks which have got Mewtwo and Darkrai in them, and one of the things for me was going to be, one of the things I raised on the podcast, what are the set symbols going to be? Because that was very important as to whether Mewtwo was a Next Destinies card, only legal and expanded, or whether it had a new designation, some new promo designation, in which case it would also be in Standard. Sounds like fun. However, and they all seem like this, but they're pretty good. For instance, in the Mewtwo deck, you're getting a 2-2-2 Zubat, Golbat, Crobat line. That's pretty gosh darn good. You've got Sycamore in there, Pokemon Fan Club, N, Shauna, Professor's Letter, couple of double colourless energy, a Bicycle, a Max Potion. A Max Potion, the price was starting to get up there for that. Level Ball, couple of Escape Rope. It's a kind of thing you're going to need more than you get of the cards in the deck, but it seems like, a nice way to get some staples. Similarly, in the Darkrai deck, you've got one of the Foul Play Zoroarks, a couple of Darkrai EX, couple of Dark Patch, couple of Catcher, couple of Plus Power, some Roller Skate, Sky Arrow Bridge, Skylar, Sycamore, couple of Ultra Ball, a Xerosic, couple of Muscle Band, a Lysandra, some really good staple trainers. So, if you're in the need for a few staples, especially in Expanded, you could do a lot worse than picking up, one of these two, quite frankly. Looks pretty gosh darn cool. So, that's the news for this week. Let's have a look at the results of the regionals. And once again, there are lovely people out there in the world who are, quite frankly, helping me out. Arguably more than I deserve, but I very much thank them for it. Now, I did actually get a chance to go and get the results myself this week, which was very, very nice indeed. But let's give a quick shout out to the people that took the time to email me. I think that's quite a nice thing to do. So, Rebiconyu, again, not only sent me the results, but he also went and sent me a week-by-week breakdown and his... where am I going with this? His impressions of the week. So thank you very much to him. He's a lovely chap. Noah Harrington sent me a lovely email about scooping, which was awesome. So thank you to lovely people. So let's start off in Fort Wayne, Indiana. This was the one which was shown over the old interwebs. And the top 8 consisted of 2 Vespiquen Flareon, neither of which made it past top 8. 3 Seismitoad Giratina, a Sableye Garbodor, a Night March, and an Eviltau, which Frank Diaz won. So from 8th upwards, we had Simon Leong with Vespiquen Flareon, Ryan Sablehouse with Vespiquen Flareon, Drew Kate with Seismitoad Giratina, and Dylan Dockery with Seismitoad Giratina. Moving into the top 4, we saw Ross Cawthorn with Night March and Nick Robinson with a wonderful Sableye Garbodor deck. By the way, if you haven't seen the stream, just go to twitch.tv/Pokemon. You will find a complete rundown. You'll see archived. There's one from Saturday, one from Sunday, and you can see the entire stream. You can flick forward till you can find the games without having to watch all of the nothing in the middle. So, highly recommend if you haven't done so, you do that. I'll certainly be doing that for the games I've not seen yet. But that Sableye Garbodor deck was awesome. More on that in a minute. And in the final, Matt Price's Seismitoad Garbodor was bested by Frank Diaz's Eviltau. Going over to San Jose, in 8th place we had Justin Poist with Donphan, 7th Chris Collins with Donphan, 5th Joe Sanchez with Groudon, 6th Dallin Fell with Groudon. Moving into top 4, we had Marshall Carey with Blastoise and Oscar Morales with Vespiquen Flareon. And in the final, Bodie Tracy's Mega Rayquaza deck fell to Gark Marcia's Seismitoad Manectric Bats deck. So, 2 Groudon, 2 Donphan, 1 Blastoise, 1 Vespiquen Flareon, 1 Mega Ray, 1 Toad. Weirdly, All of the free Seismitoad decks in Fort Wayne were Seismitoad Giratina, whereas we had a Seismitoad Manectric Bats in San Jose, but no other Seismitoad in the top 8. More on that in a moment. And over in Vancouver, in the top 8, we had Kyle Thomas's Manectric Regice Wobbuffet, Soren Radu's Evil Tau, Paul Johnston's Tyrantrum, and Jeffrey Cheng's Sableye Garbodor. Moving into top 4, we had Joey Gaffney's Vespiquen Flaridor, Alex Cox's Sableye Garbodor, and then in the final, Hayden Seismitoad Genesect fell to Jonathan Paranada's Tyrantrum Bronzong. So here, we saw 1 Manectric, 1 Evil Tau, 2 Tyrantrum, 2 Sableye Garbodor, 1 Vespiquen, and 1 Seismitoad Genesect. Which seems a little bit weird. But remember that Seismitoad Genesect, he has access to Genesect's Red Signal ability, as well as being able to get one-hit KOs on Seismitoad and on pretty much the entire Blastoise deck, 2 very big decks coming into the week. So if we look at how the format looked coming into the week, what we saw was, in week 1, Blastoise and Evil Tau were by far the best decks. In week 2, Blastoise almost completely fell off, Evil Tau stayed around, and then we had a little bit of Seismitoad and a fair amount of Vespiquen. So if we combine all 3 of them, we can see that Seismitoad now becomes the biggest deck in the format. Rather than going by pure numbers, what I want to do today is have a look at, looking at the 3 tournaments. Because one of the weird things here is that different things will be good at different tournaments. Over in Vancouver, Tyrantrum's looking pretty good, but only in Vancouver. Might be that it's only the people in Vancouver that have a good list, or maybe it's only the people in Vancouver that like playing it. But the fact that it's 2 people that have done well over a whole bunch of regionals shows me that it's maybe not the powerhouse deck, or at least it's not yet. In the same way, Blastoise has completely fallen off the radar because we only saw 1 Blastoise over 3 regionals. The number 1 deck really seems to be Seismitoad. It's really the only deck that was shown across all 3 regionals. Evil Tau won Fort Wayne and cut Vancouver, but they were the only 2 top 8s out of all of them. Vespiquen Flareon, I tell a lie, that also did well over all of them, but it didn't tend to do very well. We had top 4 in Vancouver and San Jose and 2 top 8s in Fort Wayne, but unlike Seismitoad, which made the final in all of them, and Evil Tau, which won in Fort Wayne, Vespiquen Flareon doesn't seem to have the staying power that the other decks have. Night March, we only saw 1 in Fort Wayne, and that was by Ross Cawthorn, who is, really one of the best players ever. He's been to Worlds every year. We saw Groudon and Donphan doing well in San Jose, but only in San Jose. And we saw a little bit of love for Manectric. It did win in San Jose, but it's listed as Seismitoad Manectric, so it seems like a Seismitoad-centered deck, with Manectric for the matchups which would otherwise be bad. And Kyle Thomas got into top 8 in Vancouver, but didn't go any further. So what does this tell us about and I'm going to go into a couple of these decks in more detail in a moment. But now that we've seen all 3 weeks, what does this tell us about the format as a whole? And we are in the wonderful position here that we've had 3 weeks worth of results. So I can give, and this is why I think doing something like this on a podcast where I can kind of rattle on a bit is better than trying to write it up in an article that you've got to read or just looking at a list of results. I think I can, give you more time and effort and conclusions than others maybe can, because they're trying to do it in a written form. If that sounds rude, I do apologise. Please don't hate me. So, what can we see? Blastoise is really, really good when people aren't prepared for it. When people are prepared, it's not doing as good as Seismitoad Giratina, which is weird because it seems like Blastoise would beat that. It's always going to have a turn with trainers. It should set up turn 1 most of the time, and as soon as you're set up, you win because you're not using tools, stadiums, or special energy, the things that Giratina's attack stops you using, and you're one-hit KOing, whereas Giratina only does 100 damage. But it's not that great against Night March. It's not that great. It's really not that great against Vespiquen because of the weakness and the ease with which it can be one-hit KO'd. It's not necessarily that great against Mega Rayquaza because trying to KO a Mega EX with a Caldeo takes an awful lot of energy, whereas Rayquaza gets the return KO for just 3 energy. So Seismitoad, good when people aren't prepared. Now, I've spoken to some friends in the game that I really respect, really good players, perennial Worlds competitors every year they've been there. They'll be there again in 2016. And what they've told me about Blastoise is that the standard lists that people are playing, most of which are really, and it does make me chuckle. I was looking around the last couple of days, doing my research for the podcast as I always do. And I saw a couple of Blastoise lists. They were like 3 or 4 cards different from Tristan Van Wagner's Worlds winning list. And they're like, hey, if anyone wants to see my list, which I did really well at, the regionals, my list is really consistent, is really good, come see my. And it's like, yes, of course it's good. It won Worlds. And you changed a couple of cards. Sorry, I don't know if that might sound rude, but it doesn't take a genius to figure out that if you take the World's winning list and change a couple of cards, it's going to be pretty good. By the way, when I tell you about my tournaments this weekend, I did just nick a list off the internet and change a couple of cards. So I'm as bad as them, but at least I didn't, try pasting it and saying, oh, look how great my original list is. We can see that Yveltal is here to stay. It's not the powerhouse it was in week 1, but Yveltal, the best conclusion I can give you on Yveltal is this. It is a very good deck. And it is a deck which allows you to outplay your opponent, which is why people like Frank Diaz do so well with Yveltal, and other players maybe don't do so well. It's got basically 50-50 matchups against absolutely everything. Night March, really starting to fall off in popularity. We saw a bunch on the stream this weekend. We only saw one make it into top 8. And like I said, that was Ross Core form. We didn't see any other Night March in top 8. Why? Because Night March really falls to Seismitoad Giratina. The second that, firstly, Seismitoad slows your deck right down. And as soon as Giratina comes out, you can't attach double colourless energy. That's gonna hurt. So if the Seismitoad doesn't slow you down enough that you don't set up, the Giratina makes sure that you don't have enough energy to finish out the game. So that's one reason it's gone down. Also, these Vespiquen decks with Flareon tend to use Blacksmith to accelerate energy to Flareon late game. Therefore, they are and I know they didn't say this on the stream this week, and I completely disagreed. Vespiquen has the advantage over Night March in one respect. Night March uses basics, therefore gets going quicker. Vespiquen can accelerate energy with Blacksmith, whereas Night March has to use DCE, or it can use a single energy on Mew, but then you're giving up 2 prizes with your attacker. Which means unless the Night March gets a much better start, Vespiquen should beat Night March. So you can easily see why Vespiquen starts doing well here. Good against Seismitoad, good against Night March, alright against Yveltal, but not particularly great. And they're really and Rayquaza. Let's give a little bit of love to Rayquaza. It came second in San Jose, but that was the only... No, I am right. It came second in San Jose, but that was the only Mega Ray that actually came round this weekend. Now, it gets some love for coming second, but then again, Tyrantrum Bronzong won a regionals. But then that's one guy, so it does make me a teensy bit worried. So let's have a look at the top decks in the format then. In Expanded, top deck, it's Seismitoad and it's Yveltal. They are the best decks in the format. Probably Seismitoad Giratina, but as we've seen from this weekend, you can play it with Bats, you can play it with Manectric, you can play it with Genesect, and it will be a very, very strong deck. By the way, Fort Wayne Regionals, just under 500 people at a regional championships. That is utterly ludicrous. And it also means that the results from that regional do carry more weight than the others. So, we've got Seismitoad and Yveltal as the best decks in the format. Blastoise as a dark horse when people aren't prepared. But unfortunately, it's fallen off 2 weeks in a row now, and that makes me worried for it, despite it being the best deck in format week 1. Night March is viable but not great. Vespiquen Flareon is up there with the best. So it's really Yveltal, Seismitoad, Vespiquen, Flareon, really as the best decks. And then coming in just behind as viable decks, but not the best decks, we've got Blastoise, Night March, Mega Rayquaza, and really Sableye Garbodor, maybe with Tyrantrum in there as well. And then you've really got Manectric, Groudon, Donphan coming in behind them. Decks that can do well but need better matchups. Seismitoad Giratina, like I said, the biggest problem with Seismitoad Giratina is Blastoise. It can hold up against almost anything else, but anything that can do more damage than it, that doesn't rely on special energy / stadium / tools, really falls down quickly. And Blastoise needs none of them and can one-hit KO. So, you can lock it down with Seismitoad, but this isn't Vileplume, or it's not... What's the tree called? I've completely forgotten the name of that stupid tree. Trevenant. Hence, tree. Yeah, I get it. I got there in the end. It isn't them. They can't do a turn 1 lock. You've got to give your opponent 1 turn to get a Blastoise out. And the chances are they're going to get the Blastoise out in that turn, and then you are going to be in trouble. Yeah, they can't use Superior Energy Retrieval while they're under Trainer Lock, but they're going to be one-hit KOing, and you're going to be doing 50 damage, 80 with a laser Furbank. They don't need to be. They only need to be using the Superior Energy Retrieval when you knock them out. And that ain't going to happen too quickly. Everything else, the Groudon, the Donphan, I'm not buying these as amazing decks right now. Couple of top 8s each in one regional, I'm afraid doesn't tell me enough. So let's look at the 2 decks from here that we haven't looked at very much. We haven't discussed very often. Firstly, Sableye Garbodor, a brilliant deck, and this was on the Fort Wayne, Indiana stream, so I encourage you all very strongly to go and have a look at this. It's a very simple deck. You use Sableye's Junk Hunt, which allows you to get 2 trainer cards, 2 item cards back into your hand every turn. Simple as that. How does that win you the game? Because you combine it with Garbodor to lock abilities. You use Life Dew so that every time they KO Sableye, essentially, if they KO a Sableye every single turn, they have to essentially take 12 prizes. They knock you out when you've got Life Dew attached, don't take a prize. You put a new Sableye up, Junk Hunt, they knock it out, take a prize. You put your third Sableye out, put Life Dew on, they knock it out, and they've knocked out 3 Sableye and taken a single prize. They only take a prize every other knockout, and that's if they can take a knockout every turn. Then you play Enhanced Hammer, Crushing Hammer, Team Flare Grunt, Xerosic to get rid of energy, and you play Lysandra. So they're not just sitting there getting their favoured attack off every turn. You're using Lysandra to bring stuff active they don't want active, and you're using Crushing Hammer, Enhanced Hammer, Team Flare Grunt, etc. to get rid of all their energy, stopping them from actually attacking. Then you play cards like Trick Shovel to deck them out a bit quicker. Because now you can play it with Laser, but the one we saw on stream this week wasn't playing Laser. If you play it with Laser, then you aim to win through Poison rather than just deck out. But the one on the stream was very much winning by deck out. Big downside, of course, if you lose a game, chances of winning the best of 3 are almost non-existent because you've got to win twice by deck out. At least with Laser, you can take a couple of prizes. Now, it's not so bad in Twist, but in Top Cut, where it's game 3, 1 game each, whoever's ahead on prize wins, and spoiler alert, you saw this happen, I think it was in Top 4? You saw Nick Robinson Sableye Garbodor lose to Frank Diaz's Evil Towel that had taken like 2 prizes. Now, were that Swiss, it would have been a draw, and, if you win game 1, your opponent can take 5 prizes in Swiss. It's not completed unless it's completed. But remember, in Top Cut, because you've got to have a winner, it comes down to who's ahead on prizes. So you sit there, you take stuff out from the bench into the active, you get rid of all their energy, and you discard a few cards with Trick Shovel, you stock them taking prizes with Life Dew, and then they essentially lose the game. People that don't know how to play against it, and it's not a very well-seen deck, it's a moderately rarely seen deck, so there's a whole bunch of people out there that don't know how to play against it. They'll end up drawing like 20 cards in their deck, and then realising what the Sableye deck is aiming to do. Or overextending to take a couple of KOs, and then they can't take the 12 KOs needed before they run out of cards. And you saw that Frank won that game by just going Baby Evil Towel. and just taking prizes very slowly. Brilliant thing about Life Dew, it's not just knocked out from damage, so even if you knock them out from poison, you still don't take a prize. A cool little deck, one we will see more of and expanded as it goes along. Again, this would do terribly against Blastoise. Blastoise, you just can't discard their energy fast enough. But unfortunately, Blastoise going down means that decks like this rise up. And that's a weird thing, and this is what we see in regionals, and regionals tend to be settling down. There was a lot less variation between weeks 2 and 3 than there were between weeks 1 and 2. Because people have realised, and it's kind of weird, because Blastoise was really, really good, but Blastoise, it's about 50-50 against Yveltal, and it really falls hard to Vespiquen. And it's not great against Mega Rayquaza. So as those decks see a rise in play, Blastoise sees a fall in play. So then we get decks like Seismitoad, Giratina, and Sableye Garbodor. Decks which, Blastoise would run through in about 5 minutes flat. Well, now, all of a sudden, with less Blastoise, now they can come. Now they're doing quite well. So the other deck I suppose we need to have a quick look at is this Vespiquen Flareon deck. Now, I've spoken about Vespiquen many, many times, and one of the saddest things for me about the current standard format is that Vespiquen sucks. It's just really, really bad. And this makes me really sad. I was so excited for Vespiquen. As soon as the pre-orders went up online, I bought 4 Combi, 4 Vespiquen, 4 Spinarak, 4 Ariados, 4 Forest of Giant Plants, 4 Unknown, a whole bunch of Eevees, Flareons, Vaporeons, Jolteons. I was ready, ladies and gentlemen. Literally, the Chaos Cards, it's a site I tend to use in the UK. It's a good site, one I tend to use. I'm not being paid to promote them, but it's where I bought them from. I'll be nice. I'll give them a little bit of free promo. I'm nice like that sometimes. They tend to put their pre-orders up on the day of release, which can be a little bit annoying, because it's not like, boom, 9 o'clock, it's, right, we got 5 minutes, let's stick them up. And I've told you before about the problems shops, especially online shops, have nowadays. People break the street date, and that means that the distributors send to these online stores very, very late to stop them breaking the street date. And unlike a brick and mortar shop on the high street, they've actually got to resend these to people. That keeps them kind of busy enough not to start putting up the singles. When they did put up the singles on the day, I got them, it was awesome. And then it turned out it kind of sucked, which was really sad. Hey ho, these things happen. But in Expanded, it's found new life, and let me explain why. Now, Vespiquen, it's got that revenge attack, 20 damage plus 10 for every Pokemon in your discard pile. It's good when it's really hitting for weakness, but there are 2 main problems with it. And they're both basically the same thing. You run out of Pokemon, and yeah, I know you could use You can use Sacred Ash to get them back, but then you've got to get them back and draw into them. It's a pain in the neck, and you need a DCE. So you're really, really reliant on the DCEs. And those 2 problems basically combine. So even if you had a good start, you made a consistent list, you got going nice and quickly, mid to late game, you could really run out of steam. And you don't want to run out of steam in the mid to late game. In the early game, you're 2-hit KOing. In the late game, you want to have, 18 Pokemon in a discard pile and be 1-hit KOing EXs for 2 prizes. That's how the deck wins. But not if you run out of steam mid to late game. You're probably not KOing EXs on turn 2. And I always find it hilarious that everybody, whenever you go online, there's a lot of idiots in the community at times. And I saw so many people going, oh, mate, my Vespiquen list, yeah. I mean, I turn 2 an EX every time. If you're not 1-hit KOing an EX on turn 2, then, you've got a terrible list. Where are all these people? And where are all these lists that are getting a turn 2 KO on an EX every time? I would like to see these lists, because they're not winning tournaments. But that's where Flareon comes in. I don't know why I'm raging against people on the internet this week, but I fear it might carry on. This can be my ranting against internet people week. I like to think that the people listening to this podcast are intelligent and nice enough that, you'll be putting stuff on the internet, but you'll be putting sensible, considered stuff, not, mate, I'm getting a 1-hit KO on a Mega EX turn 1 every game. Or like the guy I saw online who was saying he had a Giratina list that got a turn 1 attack every single game. I haven't seen him winning any tournaments with it. Nor have I seen the list. In fact, everyone's playing it with Seismitoad because you can't do it consistently. Hey-ho, these things happen. Moving on. So, the way it works is you've got the Flareon, who's got, weirdly, the exact same attack. 20 damage plus 10 for each Pokemon in your discard pile. Two huge advantages you get from putting Flareon in this deck. Number one, you now have 8 attackers. You only need 6, because when 6 go down, you lose the game. So you've now got a 4-4 Vespiquen line, and you've got a 4-4 Flareon line, which means you don't even need to run Sacred Ash. You are not going to be relying on using Sacred Ash to put Combis and Vespiquens in the deck and get them out for the late game smashing. When it comes to the late game, when you can get your big KOs, like I said, big failing in standard, by the time you've got enough Pokemon in the discard to get the big KOs, you are not going to have the Vespiquens out to actually use them. Well, that's not a problem. You can use Flareon. Secondly, you can play something ridiculous like free basic fire energy. I think Jimmy O'Brien, he made top 32 this week. He unfortunately didn't. No, sorry, he did make it. I believe he made it to top 8 again this week. I could be wrong. He did. Sorry, he didn't make it to top 8. It was Ryan Sablehouse and Simon Luong. But I'm pretty sure he made it into top 32. I'm not 100% on that either. But I know we saw him on stream. We saw him doing well on stream. So if he missed, it wasn't by much. And he's a guy that went with 1 draw and 0 losses all the way last week to win. And he's playing free fire energy. Because you play Blacksmith. Blacksmith being a supporter that allows you to attach 2 fire energy from your discard pile to any fire Pokemon. So you use that to attach fire energy from your discard pile to Flareon, and now your other problem's gone. You're not running out of DCE in the mid to late game, because when you get to that stage, even if you're only playing 1 Blacksmith, you add in 4 VS Seeker, that's 5 Blacksmith. Which is 9 attacks with your 4 DCE. Now we're rolling, ladies and gentlemen. And that's why Vespiquen is good in Expanded and not in Standard. The 2 biggest problems with Vespiquen were running out of viable attackers and running out of DCEs in the mid to late game, which was annoying because that, of course, is the time where you're actually in a position to have enough Pokemon in the discard pile to get the big one-hit KOs. And both those problems are fixed. Which means, which games do you lose? Well, let's say you're not playing Startling Megaphone and you play against a fighting deck of a whole heap of Focus Sashes. And we did see this on the stream over the weekend. That's going to be a bad matchup for you. Similarly, when you're playing against Night March, if they get a really good start, they might beat you. But actually, even if they get a really good start, they have 4 DCE, you have Blacksmith. Their only way to really attack, for 1 energy is using a Mew plus Dimension Valley to copy Night March on a Joltik for a single energy. Well, if they're doing that, they're attacking with a Mew, which means you're getting 2 prizes, which means if they got the first prize, well, now you're closing the gap. You're bringing the prize trade even again. So, really good matchups against the board. Now it can struggle to 1-hit KO Megas, but you rarely need to because you can afford to 2-hit KO Megas when they're 1-hit KOing you for 1 prize. And even late game, you might be able to get 1 if you really play. If you play until you got like 3 Pokemon on the field, a stage 1 and a basic at the end of the game, then you might then be able to have, 20-something Pokemon in the discard pile and then get the 1-hit KO on the Mega. Now, it can struggle against Seismitoad Giratina, purely because Giratina will be 1-hit KOing while stopping you attaching your double colourless energy. So if your opponent can use Seismitoad to slow you down, and then when the first Seismitoad goes down, bring out Giratina so you can't get your DCEs on board, and you're not in a position to use Blacksmith, that can be a downside. Because remember, we saw both the Vespiquen Flareons going down in top 8. Also, it can struggle with Yveltal if you can't get your Jolteon. And that's the other thing. You can still play the Jolteon and the Vaporeon, so you can be hitting for lightning and water weakness as well if you want. You're already playing 4 EVs to fuel your Flareons, so you can play these quite quickly. And then as for the Tantrum Bronzong, like I said, it's fairly simple. You've got Tantrum, you've got Bronzong, you power it up using double dragon energy. You can use Edgeslash, and you can use the Metal Heatran, the non-EX attacker we've talked about before, etc, etc. It's just a plain good deck. Is it consistent enough to win the big regionals when it's not Jonathan Paranada going down? I don't know, is the honest answer. I'd like to find out. Sounds like a fun deck. So this past weekend, before I finish off with a couple of me internet rants, I went to 2 tournaments this past weekend, and both of them I played Mienshao. I don't think it's a brilliantly good deck in Standard, which is why I'm taking it out to League Challenges. We've got our first regionals coming up on the 7th of November in Huddersfield. Speaking of which, games are being recorded, and I will be putting them up with commentary, and hopefully live streaming Top Cut, assuming I don't make Top Cut. We'll see if I play Mienshao to see if how good a chance I've got. I did record games at both tournaments this past weekend. They will be going up online starting in the next couple of days, so don't worry your pretty little heads about it. I'm hoping probably Saturday the first couple games will be going up. I recorded 5 rounds, well, kind of 5 rounds. One was very, very short. In Norwich and 4 rounds in Sheffield. So we've got some games going up. And like I say, 7th of November, the first UK regionals in Huddersfield. Footage will be recorded. It'll be going up on my YouTube channel, youtube.com/PTCG radio. And while we're in the pluggy section of the podcast, Twitter @the Wassy, email ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk. And remember, go and subscribe on YouTube and to Wassy Plays, because it's video games and it's awesome. I haven't done a new video for a week or so on that. I need to get one up soon. And as for, the podcast itself, you can find a complete archive of all of them on ptcgradio.wordpress.com. So it's all out there. And I do need to work on trying to get the podcast up on Stitcher, I've realised. Because it's not on Stitcher, and it probably should be. It's on iTunes, it's on SoundCloud, it's on YouTube, but it's not on Stitcher, so I should probably go and have a gander. So, the Mienshao list, it's very, very simple. It's kind of like Donphan, and it's a fighting deck, which is why it's right up my alley. Mienshao does Aero Turn, it does 40 damage for 1 fighting energy, and you put it back in your hand. You add a strong energy and a fighting stadium and a muscle band, that's 100 for a single energy, and it goes back into your hand. So you play a 4/4 Mienshao, you play 4 Hawlucha, 4 Robo-Subs, and you play Focus Sash. And you make sure that every Pokemon you have in play has Focus Sash on. So your opponent basically doesn't take prizes. What you can do, as long as your opponent isn't playing something like Megaphone or Xerosic to get rid of it, you can literally Aero Turn, put up a Mienfoo with a Focus Sash, they hit it, doesn't get KO'd, goes down to 10 HP. Remember, Focus Sash puts you on 10 HP, but you stay alive and your Focus Sash gets discarded. And then you can Aero Turn with that one, healing all the damage off, and just rinse and repeat. You use Eco Arm, which allows you to put 4 Pokemon tools back in your deck from your discard pile, so you are literally trying to stop your opponent ever taking a prize. It's one of the reasons it's good nowadays is because N isn't in the format. Now, we have Ace Trainer, which puts you down to 3 cards, but if you know your opponent's playing it, you can prepare. So yeah, nice and simple, easy. And that really is it. You use Hawlucha against some decks, and remember, when you put a Focus Sash on Hawlucha with a strong energy and a fighting stadium, you do 100 damage to an EX, they don't KO you, you KO them, and they still haven't taken a prize. So, round 1, I'm drawn against a Lucario Bass. I did a silly thing, ladies and gentlemen, because we're in a standard tournament, and I'm sitting there, and I draw a Skylar. And Friday was one of my worst ill days I've had in the past couple of weeks. I should not have gone to the tournament, but I did, so let's just, I went after work. I was not in a tournament-y kind of mood. It was fun, I just wasn't up for it. I draw a Skylar, and I start thinking, hang on a second. Skylar's not very good in this deck. Why am I playing Skylar? And then I thought for a few seconds, and I thought, Skylar's not legal in this format. So I was completely upfront. I showed my opponent. I said, I've just drawn this, and I got my actual Shauna. It was supposed to be a Shauna. You can see where I made the mistake there. I got the actual Shauna out of my deck box, and I said, it's supposed to be this card. Do you mind if I switch it over? Showed him the Skylar, showed him the Shauna. He watched me put it in, and we carried on with the game. I asked if he was all right, if that was okay, if he wanted to call a judge. No, we carried on. He was playing Lucario Bats, and all 3 Golbats were prized. Placing damage with Golbat is one of the best ways to get around Focus Sash, because Focus Sash only works when you've got full HP. The game turned out to be very, very easy, because I'm sitting there attacking Lucario's, and he's got no way to get around my Focus Sashes. He took, I believe, 1 prize. He was a newer player, and all his Golbats were prized, so it should have been an easier game. End of the game. One of the judges calls me over, And I explained to him, like, it's about Skylar, isn't it? And I was completely upfront. I told him exactly what had happened. Now, in reality, the ruling goes like this. If it's looked at during the game, it is an illegal deck. Skylar comes out for a basic energy and I get a match loss. However, if it's after the game has concluded, nothing can be done. As long as my deck is legal when they look at it, they have no proof that my opponent's telling the truth. What I could have done was stand there and go, never happened, mate. But I like Norwich, I like the people there, and I'm far more interested in having fun than doing well. So what I said to the guy was, if you want to give me a game loss, I will not argue with you. My opponent, lovely chap, he specifically said I wasn't going to win the game anyway. I really don't want him to get a game loss. Judge says it's a little local league challenge. We're all friends here and it's an easy mistake to make. I did not have to be given a game loss for this before anyone gets... And I've checked with judges. Had it been discovered during the game, it could easily have been a game loss. Didn't have to be. It is always at the judge's discretion. But it could have been a game loss during, it couldn't have been afterwards, although I had offered to take one, at which point they can give me one because I've offered. But I win, and it's good. Round 2, I'm drawn against Corey Kirkham's Rayquaza, and oh my goodness, I wish this game was on stream. Corey uses Zero Sick over and over again on my Focus Ashes to take prizes. I play incredibly weird. I mean, I had to, with my Sacred Ash in the discard pile, I have to Juniper 3 Mienshaos, leaving me 1 for the rest of the game. But I'm pretty sure I can finish it off with Hawluchas. Early game, I can play a Corinna to get a Pokemon and a Focus Sash, but instead I just Juniper because I need to go aggressive. I get a bit lucky, it pays off, and I win a nail-biting game. Round 3, I'm against Groudon, and Groudon... No, sorry, round 3 I'm against Night March, and I'm playing free Enhanced Hammer, and I'm one-hit KOing / 2-hit KOing, and he's one-hit KOing, except unless I've got a Focus Sash on, which I always have. I let him 2-hit KO or Hawlucha, and that's the only prize he takes in the game. Corey, I believe, took 3 prizes in the game, maybe 4. I like to keep a count because it's a prize denial deck. I don't usually do so. So, with all this borne in mind, it was a fairly easy game because he wasn't one-hit KOing, and every time he did, I got rid of his double colourless. It was Night March Vespiquen, which means it really relies on double colourless, and there was, unfortunately, every time he doesn't get a KO, I get rid of his DC, and there's really nothing he can do. A lovely chat, Will Groom, really fun game, but it was... Now, I did have to top deck a Juniper turn 1 because I had a very scary opening hand, but it's the kind of deck where if I don't draw dead, I should win. Similarly, in round 4, I'm drawn against Groudon, which is another very, very... Rayquaza, not a great matchup for Mienshao. Winnable, but difficult. But Vespiquen, Night March, and Groudon, they're not bad matchups. So I'm drawn against the Groudon. Weirdly, there were 2 Manectric decks, Mienshao and Groudon, in top 4. The Manectrics played a mirror match while myself and the Groudon player sat there looking at the next table going, why couldn't we have had the Manectrics? Although I will see in a minute. So yeah, and against the Groudon, as long as I can keep drawing into... Now I draw so dead in this game, but Mienshao doesn't need many cards. I had Corinnas, I kept my Focus Ashes going, and, he's doing 200 damage and discarding the stadium, and all he's really doing is getting rid of my Focus Sash. In that game, my opponent took 3 prizes. He knocked out, I think I counted 12 Pokemon. He took 12 knockouts and collected 3 prizes. Because every time he's hitting a Pokemon, it's got a Focus Sash on, or it's a Robo Sub. And I win. Now, actually, in that game, and again, I told you I wasn't feeling too good. I was playing really slow that game. And in reality, time got called, and I did manage, I probably could have taken the rest of my prizes in that time. But it occurs to me that if I'd played a little bit faster, I guaranteed win. I could have lost the game because I slow played a little bit, or drawn the game. As it happens, time's called, and I love playing at Athena against Norwich. I really do. Everyone there's lovely. Time's called, and my opponent goes, well, you've clearly won this game, I scoop. Didn't sit there and wait to see if I had the Lysandras. He just said, you know what, mate, you've won this game, I scoop. No, I think I had a Lysandra and a VS Seeker in hand, so I'm pretty sure I could have won, but it was still a lovely, lovely gesture. Round 5, I'm drawn against Luke's Manectric Bats, and we both draw so dead he wins by attacking with a Zubat. He KO'd a Hawlucha and a Mindfu with a Zubat. That was our entire game. I recorded it. You get to see it. Yay. But I finished 4-1, I come second, I get 12 championship points, and I'm rolling. Next day, I go to Sheffield, playing the same deck. What I did was I took out the free Enhanced Hammer I was playing the previous day, and I changed them for free Trainer's Mail. And my theory was absolutely sound. Well, I didn't really use the Enhanced Hammer. It's only really good against decks like Giratina that really rely on it. I know I used it against Vespiquen Nightmarch, but I don't think I needed it. And you're basically playing 10 supporters, and you can't play Shaman because then you're giving up 2 prizes, and it kind of goes against the whole prize denial thing. So you're playing 4 Corinna, 4 Juniper, 2 Shauna, more on that later, and you can draw really bad with the deck. So I thought I want to put free Trainer's Mail in, so that I've got a bit more consistency. And needless to say, it backfired spectacularly. Round 1, I'm playing against Skeptile Ariados. Yeah, the Ariados that poisons you. Which means that my opponent, every time he attacks into a Focus Sash, I just die from poison the next turn. Game 1, I win fairly comfortably. My opponent doesn't draw much. Game 2, he ends up attacking with Lugia, and he essentially wins because he's able to put 2 DCEs on a Lugia. Gee, Enhanced Hammer would have been really good that game. Bearing in mind, with 4 Corinna and 4 VS Seeker, Corinna is your most used supporter, and you can easily search for the Enhanced Hammer almost any turn you want them. Game 2, my opponent draws better. There's nothing I can do. He can go through my Focus Ashes. Game 3, I play carefully, I go first, I draw okay, and I manage to scrape out a win. It's weird. Groudon, brilliant matchup. Vespiquen, Nightmarch, brilliant matchups. Rayquaza, winnable. Anything Manectric, really good matchup. But Skeptile Ariados, terrible, terrible matchup. And then round 2, I'm drawn against Giratina. Now, Giratina is almost an auto loss. Because essentially, the second my opponent attacks, I lose access to Focus Sash, Fighting Stadium, and Strong Energy, and Muscle Band. Which means I can't do my thing anymore. I am free hit KOing, if I'm lucky, because my opponent replaces a Stadium, and then I can't use Fighting Stadium. So I can have a Hawlucha, I really need to Focus Sash, but I'm not 2-hit KOing unless I've got Strong Energy and Fighting Stadium for one of the 2 turns. So I'm 3-hit KOing, he's playing AZ, I lose 2 games. I do get a knockout in game 2, there's nothing I can do. If I'm playing Enhanced Hammer, he's playing 4 Double Dragon Energy. He needs a Double Dragon Energy to use Giratina. I have 3 Enhanced Hammer, which means in reality he has 1 Double Dragon Energy. And if he gives up on that, he can attack with Lugia or Non-EX Xerneas, but the second he does that, I've won the game, because he's playing my game. I get to 2 or 3 hit KO while he's not taking a prize through Focus Sash. That's lovely. So that's a deck building choice. Now, I've no animosity towards losing that game. I lost that game on the deck building choice to take out the Enhanced Hammer. Trainer's Mail did nothing for me all day. Round 3, I play a new player. He's playing a steel deck, but it's a new player's deck. Lovely chap, fun games, went to time, nice and relaxed, but there was never any danger of not winning. Because it was a new player, he wasn't playing Lysandra and stuff like that. And then round 4, now, I'm a tiny bit salty about the last round. Now, let's be clear, I lost round 2 because of my deck building choice, and I could easily have won round 3 and it wouldn't have mattered. Let's be clear. Round 4, there are 2 Mienshaos who are on 2-1. I really didn't want the mirror match. I am drawn against Seismitoad Bats. A winnable matchup if you get a rocking start. I did not. You've got no access to trainers. Your opponent is going through your Focus Sash using the Bats. Both games went exactly the same. I need my... Because without Laser, Hawlucha comes a lot better. I need my Hawluchas with Focus Sash. Both games, I don't get the Focus Sash, and every game he's got a very, very consistent deck, a very well-made deck, and I give him credit for this. I'm not saying it's luck, it's all credit to him. Both games he gets Seismitoad, DCE, Muscle Band, and at least 2 Zubats on turn 1. There's nothing I can do. I lose both games in about 5 minutes. And then I look over and the other Mienshao has been drawn against Manectric Regice. Manectric, an EX which is weak to fighting, and Regice, who does 70 for 2 energy attachments. Yeah, that's an almost unlosable game. So the other Mienshao went 3-1 and made top 4. Although it's a lovely chap called Max. If you're listening, Max, hello. If you're not, screw you. He said he might listen to the podcast, so a little shout out. Lovely chap, don't begrudge it. I did quite well over the weekend as a whole. And what I learned about Mienshao, and we haven't talked about it on the podcast yet, so it bears having a few minutes today. What I learned about it is this. It is really good against bad decks and unprepared players. Really good players, they can do things like streaming double Shaman, so you never get a KO. Or, they're using bats and stuff, and it's got weird matchups. It's amazing against Groudon. It's amazing against Manectric. I don't think it's even that bad against Manectric bats, but you'll see in the game I played against Luke, it didn't go well that day. It was a single game I should have mentioned in Norwich. So, it's got some really good matchups. But then against things like Seismitoad decks and Giratina and stuff like that, it's utter garbage. It's a very linear deck, which means as soon as it can't do what it's supposed to do, you lose. It doesn't give you many options to play around. It's a win or a lose kind of deck. Fun deck. I doubt I'll be rocking it at Huddersfield Regionals. Also, cool little Pokemon fact. It was cheaper for me to buy Hawluchas off of French eBay than British eBay. A lot cheaper, like a third of the price. So I have 2 French Hawluchas now. And in France, Hawlucha is called Brutalibre. How much of a better name is that? So, finishing off then with a couple of things on the internet. People on the internet make me sad. Number 1, can you stop airing your grievances in public? There's a Facebook group, Burbank City Gym. And every day, and I go on there every day, I like the Pokemon news. There's some guy there who's just like, hey, my friend made me this cool hat. I want to see the Pokemon hat your friend knitted you. That is awesome. I want to see your discussion about the dual formats we're enjoying at the moment. I don't want an essay about how you tried to rule shark your opponent and it made you sad. I don't want to hear it. The other thing is, you want to be careful with stuff like this because it gets incredibly close to cyberbullying. Everybody thinks, I can put whatever I like. I mean, I teach law. I've said that before. So I'm very aware of the law and I'm very aware of teaching. And both in school and in the real world, I have seen plenty of examples, because I pay attention to this stuff, of people getting in trouble for stuff they write on Facebook. And, hey, here's some guy, everybody tell this guy how rubbish he is from my one-sided account. That's getting awfully close to the mark. And even if you're not going to get in trouble for it, it doesn't make you a nice person. So somebody puts up online, I was at this tournament in this round. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to be able to figure out who your opponent was in that round. And what do we get? A one-sided account from one person giving their account of what happened. We have no proof this is true. And the actual account on there, it was ridiculous. It was, my opponent didn't flip for sleep and he drew a card, so I called a judge and he got a warning. Why did you call a judge? It's a sleep flip. Everybody knows a sleep flip has to happen. I have been on both sides of this on many an occasion, especially in a stressful game. Either I've forgotten a flip or my opponent's forgotten a flip. So whoever it is, flips. It's as simple as that. You have to do it. There's no how you forgot to... No, his opponent wasn't allowed to flip, which for the record, the judge made a bad call. Do you really need to call the judge for that? Later on in the game, he calls a judge because his opponent didn't take a prize card. Well, you know he has to take a prize card. So you let him take a prize card. Again, if you've been playing this game for any length of time, you know that this is something that happens. So just let your opponent take his blooming prize card. Do you really need to call a judge over to give him a warning? And then the guy saying, how many warnings is this dude allowed to have? Do you want to know the official ruling? as many as you like. My record in one tournament is 9. At the ECC in 2014, I got 9 warnings for various things. Because it doesn't escalate unless it's warnings for the same thing. Because, and this might shock some of you, mistakes happen. Things go wrong. So you get a warning. If you keep making the same mistake, then it's escalated. But if you're in a stressful situation like your opponent's calling a judge every 5 minutes, that's weak. Now, the one thing he did have a point about, his opponent was kept trying to play item cards under Quaking Punch lock, which you're not allowed to do. But maybe he was put on tilt by his opponent calling a judge every 5 minutes. And here's the weird thing. He's talking about his opponent trying to get an advantage. How? If I win game 1 in a best of 3 and my opponent wants to slow play me, I'm going to sit there and have a drink away from the table. Don't want to get any spillages on anything. And I'm just going to let them. Because if they don't win, if game 2 doesn't finish, I win the match. So if my opponent wants to sit there and slow play me, let them. So that was just a silly mistake on their part. And I would certainly not be arguing for a time extension that could turn it from a win into a draw. But, ladies and gentlemen, what I want to say is this. This is a game, and I think this needs to be a weekly reminder on the podcast. This is supposed to be fun. There's no money in Pokemon. There really isn't. There's money in Magic the Gathering. There's money in poker. If you really want to play a card game that can legitimately make you money, that you can invest a bit of money into and can legitimately give you a financial reward for doing well, go and start playing poker, go and start playing Magic. These are games that will cost you a few $100, few £100, depending on what country you're in, but you can make a lot of money doing so. You can. If you win Worlds, you get like 25 grand, which I know is a lot of money. But for something which you're going to have to dedicate yourself to all year and travel around the country/world spending potentially thousands of dollars doing, 25 grand is not that much. Chill. It's weird. And even if you're I've had opponents that annoy me. Doesn't need to go on Facebook. Now, don't get me wrong, I might occasionally moan on the podcast, but I like to think that running this podcast every week and chucking it up out there and, doing what I do, if you don't want to listen to me rant about stuff, and it's not going to happen every week, but we know I am not afraid of the odd rant on PTCG radio. It's going to happen sometimes. So, I think that the fact that I run the podcast allows me to do so, but even then, I have people getting in touch with me saying, I don't really want that. And that's absolutely fair. They're entitled to their opinion. I won't hold that against you. But stop trying to embarrass people online. Stop calling people out. Because I don't have any idea if what you said is actually true. And like the dude I was reading about today, he just came across like the world's biggest tool. I called a judge because my opponent forgot to flip for sleep. Unlike every other person in the history of the game whose opponent just let them flip for sleep because everyone knows it has to be done. It's supposed to be fun, ladies and gentlemen. And if you care more about winning than having fun and making friends, you're probably in the wrong game. This is not a lucrative game, ladies and gentlemen. And this is probably one of the reasons I don't do better. I play decks like Mienshao, which I find fun, and then I just sit there playing around with my mates. Please don't be offended when I say this. All of my games this past weekend involved a lot of laughter and silliness. I wasn't playing like some person who was possessed and desperate to go 9-0 and take 30 points home at the end of the weekend. I got my second place Klefki in 12 points, and that's enough. The other rant, which we'll leave for another day because we're coming up to the hour mark, which seems it doesn't matter how much I plan to do on the podcast lately, it always takes exactly an hour. Which is weird, because I need to go and watch Back to the Future 2, quite frankly. I think 3 might have to wait for another night. So I'm going to go watch Back to the Future 2. The other thing I wanted to discuss, which we're going to leave till next week, is do we like having dual formats? My answer, hell yeah. The big problem, of course, is that we end up with, like in the US at the moment, because regionals are expanded, all the league challenges end up being expanded, all the cities end up being expanded, and then you've got states that have to be standard and nobody's particularly practiced. So That's the big downside. We will, however, have to get onto this on another week. Remember, you can get me on Twitter at @TheWassy or email me at ptcgradio@hotmail.co.uk if you'd like to get in touch and tell me anything. Thank you again to those lovely people who emailed me regionals results. I really, really appreciate it. You are lovely, lovely guys. And make sure you check out my YouTube, youtube.com/PTCG Radio, and remember that a complete archive of episodes can be found at ptcgradio.wordpress.com. You won't find all of them on YouTube. You will now. I've started putting them after a certain date, although they're usually a bit later than they are on SoundCloud and iTunes. So thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen, listening I should say. My name's Ross, and you've been listening to PTCG Radio.